Sitting there reading Colossians chapter 1, verse 15, I'm really having a hard time understanding the anti-Trinitarian logic. If you believe that the Bible is the Word of God, then you can have no other conclusion other than that Jesus is God. Starting at verse 15, it says, "Who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature." This firstborn means he has supremacy. "For by him all things were created that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible, invisible, whether they be thrones, dominions, or principalities, or powers. All things were created by him and for him." I can just stop at that point and say, well, do you believe that God created the universe? Well, yeah. Do you believe that the Bible is the Word of God? Yeah. Well, then the Bible being the Word of God, Colossians 1:16, being the Word of God, Colossians 1:16 says that Jesus, it was by Jesus, by him and for him, all things were created. So if you believe God created the universe, then you must conclude that that's Jesus, that Jesus is God. Moving on to verse 17, Paul didn't leave it at that point. He furthered it and he says, "And he is before all things, and by him all things consist." You can stop right there. And do you believe that God sustains the universe? Do you think that God, that all things are held together by him? That the universe is in God's hands? Well, yeah. Well, if you believe the Bible is the Word of God, then you must conclude that Jesus is God. In verse 17, it's clear. In verse 19 it says, "For it pleased the Father that in him should all the fullness dwell." That sums it up right there. And you say, wow, it's the King James, that's one of those word for word translations. And, it really doesn't convey the thought. Well, alright, let's take a look at a dynamic equivalent. In verse 15 reads, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation." It sounds the same to me. Of course, we know that that's supremacy, right? In verse 16, "For by him all things were created, things in heaven, things on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers, rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him." Makes it clear to me. He is before all things, and in him all things are held together. Well, what does verse 19 say? "And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn among the dead, so that in everything he might have full supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him." The fullness of God is in Jesus Christ. Sums it up right there. I just can't comprehend how, somebody can believe that God created the universe and that God sustains the universe. The Bible is the Word of God, and read Colossians chapter 1 and not come up with the fact that Jesus is God. In him the fullness of the Godhead dwells.